Now the time has come for the field trip portion of the evening. Your guide is Barbara Fischer. She's the Executive Director and Chief Curator at the U of T Art Museum and an Associate Professor at the Daniels Faculty. Previously, Barbara has been a curator at the Art Gallery of Ontario and at the Power Plant, and has produced award-winning Canadian exhibitions internationally. And tonight she's going to tell us about some of the recent and current exhibitions at the museum. These exhibits focus on settler-Indigenous relations, the extraction industries that shape those relations in many ways, and the counter-histories that are being written today. She'll talk also about the role of the museum itself, and then she's going to take us over to the University of Toronto Art Centre to see its newest exhibit called It's All Happening So Fast. So Barbara, tell us what is happening so fast.
Because I'm not wired up. Can you hear me? Oh yeah, this seems to work. Yes, that's right. Thank you, Nora. I'm here to make a pitch, but I'll give you some context first. A few years back, I started to think, as a curator, what will we do for Canada 150? The sesquicentennial is coming up, and I wondered, how do artists think about history? Usually we ask artists, what do they think of the future? We think of artists sometimes as the do line, as Marshall McLuhan put it. I was curious to see how artists were thinking about history. And, sorry. You see here an image of history in a museum. This is a work by Maurizio Cattelan, an iconoclast from Italy, who was asked to do a retrospective at the Guggenheim Museum in 2012. A retrospective usually means that you present your work in some kind of chronological order, but he decided to whirl it up into the air in an array abiding no particular order, sequence, or narrative. The installation was uncannily reminiscent of the image of history evoked by Jewish-German philosopher Walter Benjamin in his description of Paul Klee's angel, or Angelus Novus, the new angel. This angel of history, as Benjamin describes him, has his face turned toward the past, where we perceive a chain of events, normally retrospectively. He sees one single catastrophe, which keeps piling wreckage upon wreckage and hurls it in front of his feet. As you can perhaps tell from the image, Cattelan used the Guggenheim Museum, which almost resembles architecturally a kind of tornado. And instead of using the side wings, which are normally used for the exhibition of works, he just hung all of his works from the roof. So where we perceive a chain of events, he sees one single catastrophe, which keeps piling wreckage upon wreckage and hurls it in front of his feet. The angel would like to stay, awaken the dead, and make whole what has been smashed. Amongst the objects that are here are Maurizio Cattelan hanging himself, committing suicide, being on a gurney. But a storm is blowing from paradise. It has caught in his wings with such violence that the angel can no longer close his wings. So the angel is facing, in a sense, the origin where paradise was, and the storm is catching his wings and he can't close them. The storm irresistibly propels him into the future to which his back is turned, while the pile of debris before him grows skyward. This storm is, as Walter Benjamin puts it, what we call progress. In preparation of Canada 150, I asked, how do artists see the future? How do artists see the past? And one of the artists I asked was Kent Monkman. I wanted to get his view on Canada's sesquicentennial. How do you see Canada's history? Of Irish and Cree descent, Monkman has become known around the world for his large-scale paintings that often draw on the tradition of 19th century European painting to counter its narratives. If settlers saw the vastness of the North American landscape in its sublime grandeur and infinite horizons as the land of opportunity and manifest destiny, they had also emptied the indigenous inhabitants of the lands. Kent Monkman's project as an artist generally, and you probably know him, is the resetting of history, countering existing narratives to reinsert absented indigenous peoples, among them his own alter ego, instigating mischief all around. His alter ego is mischief, so mischief. A major curatorial project, the exhibition came together, and I'm sorry, I actually have to slip. This is Paul Clay's Angel of History, as described in Walter Benjamin's thesis on history. The exhibition by Kent Monkman then, prepared for Canada 150, for the sesquicentennial, came together as a precise series of juxtapositions involving works borrowed from museum collections across the country and a series of his own new works, both paintings and dioramas made for this occasion. Traversing a searing 9-chapter journey through not the past 150 years, but of course, to 150 years before Confederation, the exhibition began with New France and the time of the fur trade, when the continent's rich resources began to attract European traders and settlers en masse. Availing himself of the form of the diorama, which itself is associated with natural history, where much of the history of indigenous peoples continues to be represented, Monkman, as mischief egotistical, swings back and forth in a remake of the French Rococo painters Jean-Honoré Fragonard's The Swing, and clearly holds power. Titled Scent of the Beaver, in an allusion to both castor oil, cherished for the making of perfume, and you can guess what else, the two-spirited mischief possesses considerable strength and attraction for her suitors, Generals Montcalm and Wolfe, both of whom would die in the battle on the plains of Abraham. So you can see she is sort of being swung back and forth. Montcalm is pulling her, and then Wolfe is pulling her, and so on. But this golden moment quickly vanishes, like snow in the summer sun, in the story that follows, and under the effects of colonization. Between Scent of the Beaver and a painting from the studio of Peter Paul Rubens, a court painter of the European, French, and Belgium courts, Fruit Dance is the title of the work, and you can see it on your right-hand side, depicts the opulent lifestyles of the European courts. Kent Monkman placed an early 19th century trade silver, a most remarkable kind of crown, and this is an image of it. Think of the crown of the British monarchy, which holds nearly 3,000 pearls, precious stones, and diamonds gifted to her by the subject colonies across Africa and India to signify her power, triumph, and glory. This crown is unlike any other. It's trade silver. It was made very light so that it could be carried along long distances. And it was given in exchange for beaver pelts. So in other words, to a fur trapper of indigenous origin. The crown is unlike any other. It shows what normally remains secret in triumph and glory. That is the violence of extraction of resources that underlie wealth. Kent's own massacre of the innocents, a painting which you see here, makes this explicit, embedding the beginnings of colonial settler-indigenous relationships in the pursuits and ravages of natural resources and extractions as generator of wealth. And yes, for the two-spirited mischief, the effects of patriarchy, heteronormativity, and an anti-queer church are captured as well in this rosary which he made for this exhibition with a crucified beaver, and he does mean it that way. From here, the exhibition unfurls through the next 150 years, with Confederation representing the worst of times to come for First Nations. The annihilation of the bison to make way for farming, here depicted through a starvation table. The resulting history of starvation and subjugation by law, treaties, and containment on reservations. the forcible transfer of children to the residential school system, and life in the res house and the urban res. In the path of such destruction, where the pile of debris seems to grow skyward, amidst all of this, homage to the artist as the figure of resilience, of rebirth and endurance under the worst conditions is retained. Worst conditions here, it's perhaps difficult to see in the image because it's a larger view, but amongst the objects that surround this birth of a new child on the res is our water bottles that denote the disaster around Shoal Lake with its 20-year-long boil water advisory, and Grassy Narrows, where mercury poisoning goes back to the 1960s and today still affects over 90% of the population. Shame and Prejudice, a story of resilience, summoned in an epic way a history of settler First Nations relations in the very medium that holds public memory, the museum. It also laid the foundation for representing Canadian history, the violence that underlies its foundations. Following the scent of the Beaver, the trails of love and seduction, through to lies, subjugation, colonial violence, deliberate decimation and extermination, the exhibition modeled nothing less than a new museum of Canadian history. And this brings me to it's all happening so fast. The 19th century trade silver crown casts a long shadow, reaching right into our present and into the future of the environment. As one of the first and earliest objects in Kent Monkman's exhibition, it is like an omen of things to come, as if the dice of our future had already been cast. The exhibition, which opens at the Art Museum tonight, can be seen as a parallel story to the one that was told by Kent Monkman, but one that amplifies, documents, chronicles, and digs more deeply into the country's history of natural resources extraction, the trajectory of the path that was struck by the fur trade. It's all happening so fast, a counter-history of the modern Canadian environment, 150 years and counting, comes to the Art Museum from the Canadian Centre for Architecture in Montreal. Curated by Mirko Sardini, the CCA's director, the exhibition unfurls as an intense documentary history in multiple chapters of the Canadian engagement with the environment, with an emphasis on the late 20th century. Concerned with the way in which the modern period, during the modern period, we envisioned and built with great confidence, optimism, and ambitious future thinking, the exhibition is designed to highlight the contrast between our often idealized thinking about the environment, captured in the historical photographs of idyllic landscapes by William Notman and Alexander Henderson, for instance, to the realities of land use, resource extraction, and resulting pollution. The exhibition includes in its meticulous presentation documentation of energy generation projects such as oil, gas, hydro, and nuclear power generation, maps of the disasters of multiple kinds from burst pipelines to Lac Mégantic, the acceleration of global warming and melting of the ice cap, the depletion of resources including cod collapse and forestry clear-cutting, the pollution of rivers, lakes, water reservoirs, and the air from acid rain to Walkerton, from Grassy Narrows to the Superstack in Sudbury, and so on. It is a tour de force, and you must see it. It's an incredible exhibition and produced in a way that perhaps in Canada only the CCA can, with documentaries, works by visual artists and photographers, maps, and ample other evidentiary and archival materials. But it also is punctuated by the energies invested in the sometimes remarkably nimble, but also starkly humble actions of people to save the environment. From the Don Valley pollution probe, whom you may remember in the late 1960s, declared the death of the Don River, to Greenpeace and to Klagiokwa Sound protests. From volunteer hands-on cleanup operations to artistic interventions, such as Peter van Tiesenhausen, who copyrighted his artwork and the location where it is situated, titled Lifetime, in order to prevent the passage of various oil pipeline proposals. Importantly, the exhibition offers examples of experimental architecture and intensive research projects focused on finding different ways of acting and building for the future. This exhibition makes us look back as we are rushing past the land into the future with planes, trains, and automobiles. I'm thrilled to invite you to join us for the reception at the Art Museum and trust that, like Kent Monkman's project, it imparts a sense of urgencies of the present that have figured and continue to figure large in the Art Museum's program, calling upon an engaged creativity and innovation to focus on our collective futures, the future of the environment. And this brings me to practical matters at the end of this evening. I want to thank very much in closing and on behalf of all my colleagues who were on the stage tonight, Molly Scheuket, University Professor in Canada Research Chair in Tissue Engineering and Senior Advisor to the President on Science and Engineering Engagement, for initiating this symposium and guiding us all through the amazing process. It's been lovely to work with you. And to the team that developed all the logistics, especially Angelica Duffy, and a project coordinator for Professor Molly Scheuket, and Lindsay White, event coordinator in advancement events. Nora Young, with your wonderful voice, for guiding our presentations and managing our stage time, our dean, Richard Sommer, and sometime editor-in-chief, and President Meric Gertler for the introduction. Thank you all for coming tonight, and I'm looking forward to see you at the reception of the Art Museum, at the opening of the exhibition. It's all happening so fast. A counter-history of the Canadian environment at the Art Museum at the University of Toronto. Thank you.